So yeah, we invited Brent to talk today. They have a group of folks who have identified a gap in the solutions for climate change, and with lots of them being scientists from the National Renewable Energy Lab, this is something that they've been thinking about a lot. And so with that, Brent, do you want to just start by kind of introducing yourself and give a quick intro of what OUR&D is all about, and then we can go from there and talk a bit more.
Sure. So thank you for having us. I appreciate it. I'm kind of the nerd in the room, so all you guys are doing cute, really important uh, community organizing things, and I'm kind of the uh, the nerd that wants to figure out how we can further increase technology to help people. And so I will say that I do personally, I believe in the bumper sticker that if the people do the right thing, the leaders will follow. So I think you guys are doing the right things. So hopefully the leaders will follow you. Um, but R&D pretty much exists. Well, a little background on me. So I started being interested in sustainability and renewable energy 36 years ago or so. And spent my early part of my career making solar cells at the Solar Energy Research Institute and trying to figure out how to get solar technologies cheaper, more efficient, and last longer, basically. And so I still work there, but it's called the National Renewable Energy Lab now, and that's my day job. But my avocation, if you will, is to try to figure out how we can connect technology to help people, especially the poor and disenfranchised. We have a history in our industrial sectors of outsourcing our pollution in the worst part of industry to poor and disenfranchised people, and we need to figure out how to have technology stop that trend, not continue that trend. And you're all aware of all of those things. So R&D really was born out of the knowledge that there's so technology kind of advances from basic research to kind of a proof of concept stage, and then you start making some things in the lab that says, yeah, I can validate that this could really go into a product, and then you start to scale it up from early scale up to pilot scale, and then you get to full manufacturing. And so there's kind of this gap in funding to get money to take things through the pilot scale. They call that a valley of death. But it turns out there's a lot of people with money that want to invest in that area. So that gap is kind of being filled up with socially conscious green investors. There's another gap at kind of the proof of concept level. So there's a lot of money to do basic science. There's kind of a lot of money to do applied science. But that transition between the two, there's a pretty good funding gap there. So we formed R&D to see if we could get private donations to kind of fill that research gap there. So if you will, there's American Cancer Society, there's a Leukemia Society, there's Diabetes Society. This is a really common method in medical research to take private donations and fund research. It's non-existent in green tech. The really interesting thing about philanthropy is they're really not, the big money people are not philanthropists. They want to invest in scale up and make money off of green tech. They really don't want to do philanthropy. So it's kind of an interesting quandary. So we're trying to figure out how to get money to researchers that maybe aren't as well represented at their universities. If you're at MIT or Stanford or Harvard, you can go to your department head, and if you have an idea, and you can get some funding and do an idea. But if you're at a traditionally Black college or another university that maybe doesn't have those kind of deep pockets and wealthy alumni, getting that kind of funding, other than government funding from a Department of Energy or National Science Foundation, is really, really hard. So we really kind of want to focus our funding at kind of these non-traditional universities that have a more difficult time of getting funding.
And so that's an interesting thing that you guys have been seeing from from the ground up,
Yeah.
seeing that there's people that are like, hey, I have an idea, but not having a way to get it through those first few stages of development. What are some of the areas that you think are ripe for that could really make an impact with climate change or environmental
So,
issues?
so the good news is that it's taken a long time. I've been giving talks for decades saying that wind and solar are someday going to be cheap and we're going to be deploying them all over the planet. And we're doing that. Now, wind and solar are actually the cheapest way to generate electricity. But there are some, certainly, if we deployed, massive amounts of wind and solar, we could easily get rid of, well, maybe 70% of the emissions, carbon emissions. We still got another 30% to go. And there's some really difficult areas to decarbonize. So R&D's mission is really to help develop technologies that help the economy not put carbon or greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So we're not doing anything with taking carbon out of the atmosphere. You guys planting trees are doing that quite well, actually. It turns out to take carbon out of the atmosphere, you need billions of little devices all over the planet to suck carbon out of the atmosphere. And it turns out that we have those. They're called plants, right? So,
Right.
so I think that the remaining things that we really want to focus on are things like, how do we move people around in planes? That takes liquid fuels, and how do we not use fossil fuels to move in aviation? How do we the fabrication and use of concrete and steel put a lot of CO2 into the air? Those are really hard to decarbonize. There's certain areas of the electricity sector that are still very difficult to decarbonize. So we really kind of want to focus on those difficult to decarbonize technologies that won't be on the market, in 5 years. It's further down the line, but to finish the race, we really need to get those technologies going. So it's kind of in those areas of building materials, seasonal heat storage, things like that that are tough technology nuts to crack. If they were easy, we would have done them by now.
Right.
And
Right.
so
Mhm.
we don't want to focus on things that are already successful. We want to focus on the next generation of things that are going to be really difficult.
Mhm. And so how do people like if they know somebody that has an idea, that has a project that they're working on, how do they then, or maybe they know philanthropists that might want to fund some of this work? What's the best way? I put the link to the website in there, but
Yeah, I
how
think
how do you see it rolling out?
I see it rolling out just like you're doing it. Basically, is that American Cancer Society gets money from philanthropists, but most of it from people that have a friend that died of cancer and donate to the Cancer Society, right? So I see that that's it's that we've spent a lot of time trying to work with as they call them big fish, philanthropists, but it's a difficult sell for them. Nobody, for one thing, we're the only organization doing this outside of within a given university. MIT has their own climate funding thing. Stanford has their own climate, but if you're not at MIT or Stanford, you have no access to it. So we're the only one in this space. So that makes philanthropists very nervous. And the reality is that, like I said, they want to make money. They want to be venture capitalists, not philanthropists in this space.
Mm.
It's very interesting. It's like when I put solar on my house over a decade ago, people would say, "Well, what's the payback?" I'm like, "Well, what's the payback on your luxury car?" Right? I mean,
Right. Yeah, your granite
the
countertops.
only question you ever get payback on is a renewable energy technology, or questions on is a renewable energy technology. You never get questions about that for other luxuries or things you put in your life that, or even necessities, right? Nobody asks what the payback is on virtually any other thing, but in the renewable energy space, it's a very weird thing. Everybody wants a payback. So if they're going to put a lot of money into it, they want to put it way down the technology roadmap where they could start making money and help companies start up. So I don't see philanthropists as a big source of funding for this type of work, but I could be wrong. It could all change, right?
Yeah. So your idea is to get individuals to sign up? make a
Yeah,
donation either one
yeah.
time or repeated,
But there's
and
so
then
many
once you
beautiful needs. I mean, there's the really cool thing is I think across the the scale, if you will, from individuals doing things to like these wonderful community groups that you've been helping get going. This is awesome. We need utilities and other industrial sectors to get on board. And you know, frankly, they are. I mean, here in Colorado, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, the environmental groups tried to get the state legislators to pass a renewable energy portfolio standard for 5 sessions, and they couldn't get them to even take it to a vote. So then finally they put it on the ballot, and the voters passed it, you know, overwhelmingly. And Excel Energy, our big utility here in Colorado, fought it for. They spent tons of money fighting that portfolio standard, and then it passed. And then they figured out that, hey, wait a minute, we can make money with renewable energy. And now they're committed to be on the electricity sector zero emissions by 2035, I think. So it's just funny how things start at the grassroots, and
yeah.
they can have big changes, right? But I think you know all these people doing things. You need organizations that are doing things like uh, you know, educating politicians and doing lobbying and things like that. We need those folks continuing. We don't do that. We're focused clearly on technology,
Hmm.
but we need the lobbying groups out there and the people that go to sue companies for not doing the right thing. And then we need the climate scientists to tell us the extent of the problem and
Right.
where we need to push the buttons.
So I have a question. I mean, is tree planting a technology? Like, could that be
Sure.
a technology that, I mean, it seems like from what we've seen of these folks that are out there just, growing seedlings and getting them out there in massive numbers, um, that seems like that kind of empowering this whole army of people that knew how to grow seeds and which ones to grow and how to do that.
Where to grow the right ones?
Yeah,
That's an
forest,
important
right.
question, right? You can't.
Yeah, right. Healthy
Yeah.
forest makers.
Yeah, you don't want to plant a tree that's going to grow in a tropic zone in a temperate zone, right? So,
Yeah, and there's
yeah,
there's a lot of questions around that because of the, climate change, and should you plant the indigenous plant, or has the climate changed enough that you should plant something else, or does the indigenous plant know what to do better? So there's a lot of technology, I think, around that,
yeah, and certainly
too.
you also want to plant plants that tend to sequester a lot of carbon, not just grow on the surface. And
Yeah,
yeah, and
right. So
so you
so
want
to me
so
that seems like a good.
the more they put into their root structure, the better it is, right? So,
Mhm.
but even in agriculture, I think that's true too. If we could have crops that we grow that put more root structure, spend a lot of their energy building roots, and then we don't till it up. We do
Yeah,
non-till techniques so that we keep that carbon in the ground. Even then, I think that agriculture could be a big part of the negative carbon emission part of the
right,
equation.
right. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely. I think as I was growing up, I'm around the same age as you because I would call it Solar Energy Research
Yeah,
Institute.
yeah,
Also, that's what it was called when I was in
yeah,
college and worked there as an intern. But when we were kids, nobody really talked about technology. That wasn't really a word. Tech came in sometime later, and I think now ecology is the next big thing. That ecology is the technology.
yeah.
Um,
No, it's all. I mean, knowledge. I mean, indigenous people had knowledge of how to survive, right? And so that was their technology, and it certainly was passed on from generation to generation. People didn't make up how to farm whatever they were farming
Right. Yeah,
in a
just like
vacuum, right? Yeah,
yeah, just like that regrow project that Debs Ree and Uday did, that, it was how the older women were doing
yeah.
that informed them. Well, yeah, well, thank you so much for talking with us about this. And so what would you like, what's kind of your call to action? What would you like people to do at this point?
Well, they can get a hold of us. I mean, I think to one extent, this audience is largely focused on community action, right? And I think that if there's ideas within the communities, um, that like, hey, wait a minute, we'd really like to solve this problem, but we don't know what technology is available. I mean, sometimes there's a pollution in a community or whatever.
Mm.
And so, if we really need to look at how can we uh, influence, like you said about the community leaders, the people start doing the right thing, the leaders follow. If there's things that need to be done in a community that need a technological solution, maybe we can find the right. I'm connected to a
Yeah.
lot of people.
Yeah.
Maybe
Right.
I can help with connections.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And so, like, I'm thinking also of like Francisca has the sargassum podcast. So she's a marine biologist, and so that sargassum algae that's been piling up on beaches in the Caribbean, especially, and people are wondering, what do we do with this stuff? And is this a resource or is this a problem? And yeah, so I think that your guys' goal was to have a kind of a an offering of some kind sometime in 2021 where
Yeah.
people
So
could that had a technology idea could submit that to be considered.
eventually we're going to be very broad or open in our solicitations and our response for requests for proposals. But the first one we're going to issue is going to be a small one because we haven't raised a lot of money, and it's going to be
Okay.
focused. It's going to be focused on aviation fuel. How can we get sustainable aviation fuel?
Okay.
Just because we have some experts in that area that are willing to referee proposals.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Neat. Yeah.
so, so we figured it was better to start small with something very focused than try to be
Right.
too open. Yeah. Well,
Right.
I see there's some questions in the chat. Do you want me to address those or?
Yeah. Sure. I didn't even see. Yeah.
So one about wind and solar not without significant environmental impacts. This is absolutely true. In fact, at NREL now, we've kind of changed our mission around the electric economy, if you will, that we think that with wind and solar being cheap, that gives us access to cheap green electrons that now changes maybe some of our infrastructure. I had the second Nissan Leaf in Colorado. So for
Mhm.
instance, electric cars being part of that. And then the other two areas are the circular economy. How can we recycle everything? So how can we design solar panels and wind turbines from the beginning? So at end of life, they go back into wind turbines and solar panels. So that's a big focus at NREL. And then the third one is basically cheap electrons to molecules. How can we there's just certain things we need liquid fuels for, heavy equipment, shipping, air travel. How can we use cheap electricity from green sources then to make sustainable fuels? So
Mhm.
that's the three legs at NREL. And also at R&D, we kind of think, in these proposals, if they address the circular economy or reduced water usage or reduced land usage or reduced or better recycling methods or
Right.
reduced better material streams, supply
Yeah.
chains.
Right. As
If
yeah.
any of those things get touched in the proposal, they'll get bonus points basically on the
Gotcha. Right.
proposals.
Like the one that Lisa was mentioning, like the Jack Solar Garden in Boulder, where they're doing the the panel structures themselves are part of the whole crop layout. So it's an agriculture, it's like an actual solar farm, like they're farming and they have a solar array there that's the no-till cover crop. So that's, I think, the kind of innovation that,
Yeah.
to address that issue of, okay, what is the land use going to be of all this solar? And if we could double duty.
Yeah, rooftops are a great example also, right? I mean, the reality is we have a massive amount of rooftop in the United States, and most of it's not covered with solar. So,
Right.
in
Um,
fact, it's interesting to me. If you fly into San Francisco, you see solar on a lot of buildings, and their solar resources just okay. If you fly into LA, where their solar resources tremendous, there's almost no solar on buildings.
hmm.
So it's just we really got to get with the game, right?
Yeah, that's what Susan with an architect was saying, that now in New York, every building has to have either
Yeah.
solar
Well,
or
I will say, because you see all this gray hair, I've been in this game a long time. Um, I will say that architects have been one of our biggest stumbling blocks, actually, that they don't like the look of solar and they don't want to incorporate it into their buildings. And historically, it's been a major issue.
and
I would like to address the
yeah, go
issue
ahead.
of carbon negative, though. Uh,
Yeah.
so I think R&D's stance, maybe mostly because of me, is that we don't view technology as a way to go carbon negative. We view agriculture and nature as a way to go carbon negative. And I think the reason for that is the best place to mine carbon is is where they're burning a lot of it, fossil fuels, right? A coal plant or whatever. And so if wind and solar puts them out of business, where are our mines where it's in high concentration? You know, if you're mining gold, you want to go to a place where there's a lot of gold. You don't want to mine gold in the, you know, underneath your house. So I think that, you know, as we decarbonize the electric sector, which is the biggest one in transportation, we're all, and transportation is distributed. It's not a big source of carbon. So how is it easy to decarbonize those sources then and take carbon out of the air? Well, then you got to do it at, you know, roughly 400 parts per million. You have to move a lot of air. So it's better not to put it in the air in the first place. So we're really focused on the technologies that get the greenhouse gases stopping, that replace technologies that emit greenhouse gases.
Mhm.
And then if we have people planting trees and we have agriculture creating crops that put more carbon in the ground and not disturbing that, then I think that the farmers and the agriculturists are going to do the negative carbon thing.
Yeah.
There's another nonprofit that's interested in, and there are also a lot of venture capitalists in there that are focusing on technology to to do negative carbon devices, but that's not our focus.
Right, right. Yeah, that was good. And that's so funny that Dan Diaz was saying the way he got interested in renewable energy was by visiting National Renewable Energy Lab in 2008. And that was the
Oh,
first thing that, so Dan was out traveling around the world when the first big typhoon Yolanda hit. And he came back and started doing solar lamps and solar charging stations as a response. And that's how their organization got going. And then they started being a hub for PV training. People would come send their folks to the Philippines to get hands-on training. And yeah, so that,
so,
that's I love how it's all connected.
so I think the really interesting thing, and I'm really excited about what you're doing, Joan, and what everybody is doing in partnership with you, is that I gave a talk in China once, a technical talk, and I had my last slide. I had this picture of me standing in front of my solar panels at my house with my electric car, and all my questions were about that, because in China the average person thinks that it's up to the government to solve this problem.
Mm,
It's the idea that you could be a participant at an individual level in solving the problem was really interesting to them. Um, and so this whole idea of individual effort and community effort, I think, it's really important, and we need everybody at every scale
yeah.
doing their part. This is a global problem. So
Yeah, right, to bring their gifts.
yeah,
And as you said, focusing on those communities that have been hurt in the past, all the
yeah.
industrialized and yeah, go
I
ahead.
think it's safe to say that that R&D believes that eco justice is social justice too, right? So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us. It's been
Thanks for
really
having me.
great.
This is really
Yeah.
great work. It's really exciting to see what everybody's doing.
I know, isn't it? It's just
Yeah.
like it's crazy to see what everybody is doing and see how it's all connected. So, if you're a good story writer, you connect the last line with the first, and so I think connecting that Dan Diaz was at NREL, uh, the Solar Energy Research Institute. You guys just wrote a very nice story. So yeah, definitely go out there, watch those videos, and then meet us in just not quite 2 hours for Challenger Chat. So you get to talk to the folks that have been doing these cool things. And thank you, everybody, and we'll see you soon.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank you
Brent.
so
Thanks,
much.
Dan. Thanks, Felicia. Have a great day. Okay, bye.
Bye bye.